Hello, and thank you for joining us. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. General Bentley Nettles is a Purple Heart veteran, licensed attorney, author, and has been a public servant in various capacities for over 4 decades. He served as the executive director of the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission from 2017 through 2021, during which he spearheaded a major overhaul of the agency, transforming it to a model customer-centric, high-efficiency organization. A committed public servant, General Nettles remained actively involved in various community initiatives, including veterans support and mental health courts in his home country of Brazos. Karthik Agarwal is the founder and CEO of Gov2Biz Inc., a company building world-class regulatory and licensing service as a software solutions for government regulatory agencies. With 2 decades of experience in the technology industry working with large multinational companies, he has seen large-scale digital transformations in the private and public sector. He was deeply involved with the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission's AIMS implementation and will be bringing his perspective to how such a massive modernization effort was realized. John Sneed is a seasoned AWS technical lead at Carahsoft with 5.5 years of experience at the company and over a decade in the IT industry. John currently holds 3 AWS certifications, showcasing his expertise with AWS. Prior to his current role, he was a senior quality assurance engineer at a Bethesda, Maryland tech startup. He studied engineering at James Madison University and graduated from Penn State with a focus on application and integration. John, the floor is now all yours.
Thank you, Kaylin, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us. In a world where industries and economies are propelled by innovation, the role of government regulatory agencies cannot be underestimated. These agencies are entrusted with the critical responsibility of ensuring compliance, upholding public safety, and fostering a conducive environment for businesses to thrive. However, the journey toward regulatory excellence is often fraught with challenges, complexities, and a need for continuous adaptation. The focus of today's panel discussion is not only on technology, but on the stories that highlight the profound impact that the conversion of vision, innovation, and collaboration can have on regulatory excellence. We will delve into the challenges that regulatory agencies encounter, the strategies that empower them to overcome these challenges, and the real-world outcomes that result from synergy between technology providers and regulatory bodies. Throughout this engaging conversation, we aim to provide you, our audience, with actionable insights, best practices, and tangible takeaways that can inform and inspire your own endeavors in the pursuit of regulatory excellence. So, General, we're going to start with you. Given your extensive experience, could you elaborate on some pain points that regulatory agencies commonly face when it comes to licensing and compliance processes? And as a follow-up, how do these challenges impact the industries they regulate?
Well, sure. The typical challenge comes between the friction point between the customer and the regulatory employee. The customer may have no experience, may have lots of experience, may be trying to do something different. Same on the employee side. You may have a relatively new employee that is inexperienced at what questions asked, or you may have a very sophisticated employee who is your go-to person. But that exchange of information is where the friction point exists. And when you don't get it right, when you don't have the accurate information in the process, it gets bogged down and slowed down.
Yes, absolutely. And could you share some of the challenges that the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission was facing before the modernization project during your time there?
Absolutely. So as always, slow turnaround times, inaccurate information being put in either from the customer or just a mistake made by the employee. And so then you had to go back through that loop. The other is load balancing. We're a statewide agency with 48 offices across the state. Majority of our licenses go through the regional office in Harris County. So that took a lot of resources. With the automation, we were able to spread it across the state and move the process and the application through the system much quicker, and also avoided those kind of choke points.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah, and that's great to hear the progress you made. And moving over to Karthik, when working with regulatory agencies, what are some common misconceptions or reservations they might have about adopting technology solutions for their processes, and how do you address those concerns?
Well, great question, John. So to start off with, right, the most common misconception that I often come across is this is a technology project, whereas in reality, it is a business project, right? The technology system means to achieve the end. You are ultimately trying to streamline or modernize or automate your business processes. It doesn't matter if the technology is great, it needs to work for your business process. And this is often because in this whole industry and this, there's a lot of jargon being thrown around, right? There's always this next, a new acronym or something that is being thrown around. So oftentimes it also puts the business in a place where, they think it's a technology project. It's best if the tech guys handle it. And that creates, almost a separation between the two, whereas they should be in lockstep, right? The other one is that there are two categories, interesting, sometimes in the same agency, that the project is going to be easy, or the project is going to where everything is just magically going to happen. A project is going to happen and we don't have to take any decisions. And the other one is, yeah, it's just going to be massive. It's going to be painful because we have not done an automation in 20 years, So there are people in both camps, and somehow they coexist. Sometimes they are in the next cubicle right next to each other. Well, the reality is somewhere in between them, right? It is not going to be super easy, but at the same time, it is going to be difficult, but it's difficulty that can be managed through decisions, right? And finally, the important thing is probably it's not so much a misconception, but an undercurrent throughout any transformation project is people are going to be afraid that a technology is going to take away their jobs. Right. There is plenty in the media, social media, and news. And even every time we talk about efficiencies, people are going to think that, am I going to have a job after this? Maybe at the end of this project, once it goes live, I'm not needed anymore. And sometimes those sentiments can actually thwart the progress of the project itself. So this, I would say, are the top few, a combination of misconceptions as well as the ground realities.
That's a great point and fantastic insight. And as a follow-up question to Karthik's answer, General, did you face this, say fear of losing jobs? Did the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission have such apprehensions, and how did you address those?
Absolutely. So anytime there's change, your employees can be resistant, and your customers can too. One of the concerns I had was, well, if we build this, what happens if nobody uses it, right? You spend a lot of taxpayer dollars. So you really have to work out thinking about how to expand the comfort zone of your customers and your employees so that they will understand that this technology makes their life simpler and allows them to move through their day. We had some folks who, quite frankly, were near retirement and just said, yeah, I've had enough. I'm not going to learn a new system. They weren't interested in expanding their comfort zone. But others rapidly embraced it, which was amazing. And so we got those cheerleaders, and you have to seek information from your employees and also your customers, so you understand what their fears are and find ways to address that.
Yeah, absolutely. The feedback is critical so that you can address that and find a resolution. So moving on to the actual project, excuse me, Karthik, how did Gov2Biz's solution address these challenges for the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission?
Well, I think after the system went live, the first few things is when people got to use it, right? After that initial resistance to change, right? Of Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose the way my, capability to win bread for my family? Once that goes away and people start seeing the intention is not to replace a job, or it's just to make it easier and lubricate the process a bit, as both the licensees want stuff working faster, they want to get their license faster, they want to get into business faster. Same thing with the agency as well, and even the intermediaries in between, they want to move the decisions faster, right? And this system would allow them to do that, right? So that once that resistance went away, I think people started seeing that it's giving you efficiencies. Secondly, from an employee perspective, right, what it did add was, it's a common challenge in the government sector, right? There are lots of jobs that are open that nobody's applying for, right? And people do not want to work, right? Work for different reasons, for various reasons, right? So those job requirements now become lesser. You don't need to fill it because of the efficiencies, right? That was one. And also, it created the capability, because the way the system is built and the platform is built, it's not just for licensing, it's for other departments as well. And from a learning curve perspective, between using the system for one department or for another department, there isn't that much of a learning curve. So all of a sudden, the employees could now transfer more between departments. It created fungibility. So, and if you have skills in more than one department, you're definitely more valuable to the agency itself. And I believe there were some, General, correct me if I'm wrong, there were, situations where when there was some natural attrition, you didn't need to you didn't need to really backfill those people, right? And now, because of all these reasons, and you're able to still have the same throughput, the employees themselves could be, paid a little more because you could get more done with fewer employees. But that's sort of how our platform and our product fit. It is not to replace people, it's just to make their jobs easier so they can focus on higher order problems rather than, typing information back into another system, or, checking for, errors, typos, and spellings and issues. They're actually looking for actual issues and stopping the bad, the bad guys from getting licenses and helping the good guys get licenses faster.
Excellent. General, could you share some of the key outcomes or benefits that the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission experienced after implementing Gov2Biz's solution?
Well, and one of the things that Karthik mentioned was you really create a sense of freedom in the employees, because now they're not, their day's not filled with the mundane. They can actually focus on the more creative, more sophisticated, and more unusual applications, and really apply their regulatory knowledge instead of the day-to-day questions that they're answering, because now that's answered in the system. It did allow us to move very rapidly through licenses. I can tell you, when I started at the agency in 2017, if you wanted a restaurant permit or a venue permit, we were taking 85 days to approve the permit because of the backlog and the volume and just the process. By the time I left there, and after we'd implemented the Gov2Biz solution, the Alcohol Information Management System, we had it down in some cases to 48 hours. So a dramatic improvement for business. And of course, that also, the system documents the interchange between the agency and the customer. So that became very valuable, because you always have somebody who they're not giving you the right information, or they don't understand. They get frustrated and contact the legislature. And so the legislature staff or legislator calls over, and you can pull up that documentation and say, well, this is the information we've asked for. This was when it was asked, and they've not responded. So we can't move forward on their application. It really builds in that information base that you need in order to rapidly assess the status of a license or a regulatory issue.
Yeah, and that's a great outcome from the solution, and the addressing the queue and addressing the backlog. So that's fantastic to hear. Karthik, based on your experience working with various regulatory agencies, what are some common hurdles they encounter during the transition to technology-driven solutions?
but that's an easy one. The first and the foremost is organizational change management, right? Change management within the agency, with your licensees and other stakeholders as well, right? Now, what happened, for example, with TABC was under the general leadership and his entire second level and third level of employees, even, right? They were all in lockstep. So that made it a lot easier to navigate some of the typical challenges that come across, right? So essentially, if we go back to one of the first few comments that I made, one of the things is jobs. People are going to be afraid of losing a job, right? And sometimes they're not going to be vocal about it. It's going to be, a passive, passive fear in them. And because that can actually harm, right, the whole project, and sometimes hard to detect, OCM is very important. That level of candor and that level of honesty and that level of communication from the top at the executive level, from the agency itself, is very, very important. And also for all the the executive director and the next and the next to next level, all those departments to be in absolute sync, because you can have a 1 degree variation at the start and end up a mile away, right? So that kind of change management is important, right? Communication. Apart from that, I would say that goes beyond the organization alone. It even extends outside. Licensees need to know. While you as an agency might be undergoing a lot of change, the licensees still don't see it. They are not in the thick of things. For them, it's still an agency. They're still waiting on their licenses and things like that, right? They're still waiting for their questions to be answered. And also, just it probably goes back a little bit into the OCM, but also in terms of planning, right? It's just knowing that it is a project, that it's a process that is going to be involved. You will have to plan that your employees are going to have to spend time looking at their existing processes, answering several questions from vendors, right? Your partners, your business partners, and also validating that the system before it goes live. That means this is, in a way, it's, one way to look at it is this is their side gig almost. They still have their full-time job. They still need to keep the lights on. They still need to do their staff meetings. They still need to address licensee questions. They still need to process license applications. On top of that, there is this project. So of the system, and it's going live, and I don't know what it is about. Sometimes some people, right? So, some people may feel that way. So it's important to be, for the leadership to communicate, and for everyone in the organization to viscerally understand and have that sense that this is really the right step, right? And I have to get with the program, and that is very, very important. I would say these would be the top. And lastly, I think I'd say in the pre-selection process, right? One thing that ends up happening is when we come across many of these RFPs, right? Sometimes there is a need. Sometimes it can get really, really complicated. Everybody wants everything and the kitchen sink, right? It's important to ask for what you want, what you absolutely need, and clearly differentiate what you need and what you want, because sometimes agencies don't realize that what they're asking for might increase the cost by an order of magnitude, and for literally no benefit, right? Or no measurable impact on the ultimate outcome. I'd say these are the top few things.
Yeah, agreed on all points. And having a change management process in place is critical when transitioning to these new solutions. So in that same vein, General, change in management can be a significant factor when adopting new technology, as Karthik mentioned, in a regulatory agency. So how did you navigate this aspect during the implementation process, and what advice would you offer to other agencies dealing with similar changes?
Well, the key is always communication, not only with your employees, but with your stakeholders, making sure that you're talking to them about the challenges, what you're going to go through, what the end result's going to be, and get them engaged in being early adopters for you so that they support going forward with the software changes and the changes in the organization. If you don't communicate with them, then you run the risk of them becoming barriers to the change simply because they don't know what's happening. They don't know why it's happening. So you really have to work at communicating them. And then when you start to implement it, we had a very deliberate process by which if the customer was seeing a challenge, they could communicate that to us. We had folks that reviewed it. Either we fixed it internally, or we reached out to Carthic's team, they fixed it, or we couldn't replicate it. We weren't sure why the customer was seeing what they were seeing. So all those were resolved, and those came up to me, so I knew where we were at with the implementation process, because communicating with the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, including your employees, are critical to understand what their fears are and how to go forward. But we went from 78 permits to 35 permits, and we also rolled out a new system by which we processed them. So we actually, I wanted to be proactive about it. We would have a monthly webinar where we invited customers who were logging into the system for the first time to log on so we could walk them through the process. And we had the subject matter experts there so they could talk to them if they had questions, because once you use anything, once you use it, then it becomes not so scary, right? When you think about it, you're dealing with somebody's taking time from their business where they earn money to fill out a license or something, interact with a regulatory agency that costs them time, and they don't want to run afoul of the regulatory agency. So you want to try your best to try to ease those fears with them. And I would recommend over communicating as much as possible, simply because you then understand not only communicating, pushing out information, but seeking feedback from your customers and your employees, so you understand what that experience is like and how we can work to improve it. Once they got into the system, we started having cheerleaders, in the industry and in the employees who said, this system's great. It makes our life so much easier. And that's what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's fantastic. Congratulations on what you're able to accomplish there during your time along with Carthic and Gov2Biz. So as a closing question, I see we have some questions in the Q&A pod, but Carthic, could you share some key takeaways for regulatory agencies that are considering adopting technology to enhance their processes, and what steps can they take to ensure a successful and impactful implementation?
Great question. I'll try to keep it brief, right? First is you want to find a partner, right? You don't want a vendor, because what happens is, in this, the journey to transforming, right? Transformation from whatever systems you have, whether it's an existing set of systems, like in TABC, I believe it was a total of 18 systems, right? Whether it's converting from existing systems, which could be a combination of homegrown or paper-based processes, or truly from a manual process into a digital cloud-based process, is going to be messy, right? Anybody who tells you otherwise is not being upfront with you. It is going to be messy. So you want somebody who can partner with you, who's willing to work with you and see things from your side of the table as well, right? Which means anybody who's talking to you in jargon, right, is probably hiding behind it. You want somebody who can speak your language, right? That is, for example, when we did work with TABC, right, we wanted to understand what's the difference between on-premise and off-premise. So what we want to understand what an MB, what a BG is, or what a alternating proprietorship is, right? All these were foreign terms to us, but we made it our business to learn it, right? And I'm sure there are other vendors who do that too, but that is exactly what you're looking for. You don't want people to try and tell you, try to fit, saying this is the way it's done. You want somebody to be able to understand your business process, speak your language, and understand the nuances and the quirks, some of which might be statutory or regulatory, or there's a good reason why some of those quirks exist. But at the same time, respectfully challenge you as to why some of those quirks need to be there, right? Can some of those be ironed out, right? So that's one thing you want. And I call it being bilingual, right? Being able to talk technology, but also when you're talking to the people who are non-technical, right? You want to be able to talk in terms of their language. That's the first thing, right? Nextly is, in this process, when you digitally transform, with every transformation I've worked, whether it's the private sector or the public sector, you will discover skeletons in your own closet, right? As some of it might be, might have been the best decisions you made back then, but now they come back and, you simply cannot figure it out. Sometimes it might be from a previous prior administration. Sometimes it's just things are. You have to be willing to, be ready to be able to confront it, right? And sometimes those will be identified by, your partner. And when those are identified, it's important that to separate the problem from the person delivering the news. If your data is bad, just because the vendor is telling you doesn't mean the vendor is bad, right? The reality is you have to make some of those decisions, right? So you want to have that level of transparency and fundamentally look for trust, right? Yes, it's a business relationship at the end of it, but if it does not have the foundation of trust between both parties, you'll spend a lot of time watching your back and they'll spend watching their back, and no progress will be made. There'll be a lot of activity, but no real progress. So I think ultimately it all goes down to the relationship, right? Work with somebody you trust, build that trust. It might be someone new, but build that trust and look for cues of someone trying to hide behind, I've done it 100 times, I know what I'm doing, or trying to throw technical stuff, terms that you don't understand. I often say this to my, the people who work with me. If you can't explain this to an elementary school child in that simple language, you probably don't understand it yourself, right? Keep it that simple. Those are my, inputs on that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. There is a lot of technical jargon in the IT industry, so you want to get those people that really know what they're talking about. And I agree, building relationships and that trust makes all the difference, right? So great, thank you both so much for your input today. Kaylin, do we have questions here?
Yes, we do. So we do have a few minutes left. So we are going to take this time to answer a few questions. And again, if you would like to submit a question, please look to the question and answer section or chat section on your screen. So now, John, I will pass it off to you for our first question.
Perfect. All right. This one is addressed to the general. Could you tell us more about the strategies or techniques you use to ensure that your staff use the new regulatory technology solutions? And I know you touched on that a little bit previously in a previous answer, but could you expand on that a little bit more?
Well, they weren't going to have the option, because the way that we were funded, we no longer had funding for the old system. So once we went live with the new system, they had to use the new system, but we worked at training them, educating them, and making sure that they were engaged in the process by which we implemented the system. So they became the people who could help the customer through their challenges, right? So again, it goes back to education, training, and communication, making sure that the employees are on board and engaged in that process of implementing the system.
Absolutely. Excuse me. We have another one for Karthik. The alcohol industry is unique. Do you believe that this experience will translate to agencies that do not regulate alcohol?
I believe so. And here's why, right? I've worked with, spoken to, and interacted with agencies and analyzed many of their operations, right? And as you see them, right? Yes, alcohol, I can understand how, let's say, an alcohol license application is going to be fundamentally different from, let's say, a cosmetology license or an esthetician license, or let's say even a real estate license. It's going to be fundamentally different. And for that matter, there might be difference in let's say, Texas alcoholic law, as well as, let's say, the law in Illinois, right? It is going to be different. But fundamentally, if you look at licensing, that's what we say is licensing is our craft, right? Licensing and regulation it is an intake process where people need to supply you information. And regardless of whether you are applying to open a restaurant, or you're going to start off a bank, or you're going to sell, controlled substances, or you're going to have a business where, you're going to be a cosmetologist, you still appreciate the capability to fill your application online, right? And not answering questions that don't apply to you, right? A simple, straightforward application process that is not riddled with legal terms. It has to be straightforward, easy for you to understand, and be able to fill in an application. You'd appreciate that. And the same way, the review process, I do understand the rigor associated with issuing out licenses for something like manufacturing or a distribution of handguns, for example, or weapons, might be fundamentally different from, let's say, somebody manufacturing or selling food. Fully understood. However, the steps in the review process still fundamentally remain the same. So it does translate directly, while the forms and the specifics do not. However, fundamentally, the process itself would be the same. And I would go, I would venture to say even the results would be pretty comparable.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks we have a good one here for the general. What advice do you have for someone who sees that their agency is obviously in need of modernization, but whose state legislature is not convinced?
Well, so I would probably engage the industry members and talk about, because a lot of industry members are across states, your big wholesale beer distributors. So they have knowledge of how things are in other states. They can actually be help be salesmen for that idea, but you need to engage them because they're going to be the ones who are convince the legislators. Oftentimes the government agency is in the position of simply being in a position to talk about what would happen if they innovated, but not able to advocate for it. So you really need to engage your industry that you regulate and see what experiences they had and see if they will go and advocate for you.
And to add to that point, I mean, did hear from, another executive director from another state is sometimes, government agencies almost always are stretched for funds, right? They're always asked to do more with less, right? Every year there's an uptick in the business, but almost like clockwork, a reduction in the amount of funds that they would have. Right. So sometimes the agencies have done a great job in trying to figure out a way to make ends meet in that budget. And that capability sometimes has come back and bitten them, saying, well, you're able to manage with so less. Why do you want to change? Why do you want to modernize? Right. So sometimes that can, your effort to work with what you have, work within your means, actually does come back and bite. So it's important to have that candor, right? And say, we have been doing it, but this is not sustainable. This is where the industry is. Like the general said, right? You need multiple people, telling the same thing. That probably that's my 2 cents.
Yep. Thank you, Karthik. And then we have a last question here addressed to Karthik, but General, I'd like to get your feedback after as well. There are other software, other softwares in the market, but what sets you apart, Karthik?
Well, I'd say maybe we are awesome.
Absolutely.
But jokes apart, I think it's fundamentally, in the fabric of our business, we have made it a priority to understand the customer, right? You have to be able to step in your customer's shoes, be able to see the world from their perspective, speak their language. That is very important. Technology is just a means to the end, not the end in itself, right? We still have to understand. I go back to the fact that it's never a technology project, right? It is a business transformation project. It's going to affect their daily business. So that's one. That's in the core ethic, right? And even software as a service, the service is an important part. That's critical. It's not software, it's software as a service. So that is, built into the very fabric of our product and our company. Secondly, I mean, technology-wise, we have the technical chops, right? We are on AWS. We are served from the Gov Cloud. We have all these XYZ certifications, all the compliances. We even just completed an accelerated development program, and we are working with Carahsoft, right? You guys are selective, So we do have the technical chops. And again, TABC, for example, is the second largest ABC in the United States, Alcoholic Beverage Control Agency. When it came to the procurement process, no offense to the general, but it was rather, protracted. And to some point, it was like, do we really need to go through so many ringers, right? They selected, and a lot of the vendors that, are in pretty much all of them, it's the second largest ABC, everybody put their hat in the ring, right? And when they did, TABC went through a selection process, a very elaborate selection process that should go to telling you what is different about us or why we stand apart, right? But more than anything I could say, I think you had said that you would like to hear the general's words, right? And I guess what as a vendor, I am going to say that I am the best, but ultimately the only thing that matters is my customer's voice, right? So I defer to the general when it comes to that.
Sure. So there were two things that set them apart. One was a lot of vendors have a product that they think can help solve your needs. Karthik and them have a service. They're going to take whatever product you need and make it fit your needs of your agency. So that was a big part of the selection process. The second is, it was really the result of after we selected them, was because of the way our state legislature changed our statute during sunset. And then we had to be live 1 September of the following year. Well, we had a little incident called COVID impact us during the developmental process. And of course, like a lot of other state agencies, we were asked to give back funding to the state in order to address some of the challenges the state was dealing with. And we did. Some of that money came from the pot of money we had set aside for this project. So Karthik and their team, they not only fielded and implemented the service on time, which we had to do because we had to go live, but they did it under budget. I don't know a higher claim for a governmental contractor, vendor, or partner than to say that they did it on time and under budget, because a lot of the folks that we talked to, we looked at that. Okay, do they have overruns? Or are they going to come back and say, well, we can't get this done on time? Because that would have been a real challenge for us. And so when we looked at the vendor's history that we were dealing with, we chose Karthik because of their record, and they ended up living up to that and exceeding that.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
One extra bit of
epitome of customer oriented.
Yeah, an extra bit of motivation was somebody who told me that hey, we probably will. It'll be okay. It is COVID if we slowed down a bit. And somebody whispered in my ear. I still don't remember who it was, saying, the general will shoot you, right? That was that little extra motivation that made all the difference.
Absolutely. Well, Karthik, General, thank you so much for your time today and for this great panel discussions. Your insights were invaluable. So thank you again once more for joining us today. And with that, Caitlin, I'll pass this back to you.
Thank you again, Gov2Biz, General Nettles, and John. We really appreciate you being here. And also for the participants for joining us today. We hope that you found this webcast informative and helpful to you and your agency.